They fired a shy girl on Christmas Eve. What the Vampire King found later shocked the board. From the sky-high windows of the glass towers, the city lights reflected in 1,000 scattered points, like fireflies trapped in crystal. But inside the tallest tower, in a room far above the world, there was no warmth, no light except the cold glare of fluorescent bulbs, and no kindness. Ilara sat at her small desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed the last few emails of the day. The office was nearly empty, save for the janitor sweeping down the hall and the hum of the heating system struggling against the winter chill. Outside, Christmas Eve had arrived, but inside, the mood was anything but festive. She had always been shy, quiet, the kind of person who went unnoticed in a crowd. Her hair, dark and straight, fell like a curtain around her face, hiding her eyes when she wished to vanish. Ilara liked it that way. She preferred the safety of small corners, of books and quiet work, rather than the chaos of attention. But tonight, attention had found her in the cruelest way. The board members had called her into the large conference room earlier. She had followed silently, clutching her notes as if they could shield her from what was coming. Mr. Harrington, the chairman, sat at the head of the long, polished table, his expression unreadable but cold. Around him were the other directors, their faces shadowed by the bright light of the overhead projector. "Ilara," Mr. Harrington said, his voice low and firm, "we've reviewed your work over the last year." Her heart pounded. She had thought it would be a routine evaluation. She had done her best, even if quietly, never drawing attention to herself. "Unfortunately," his words cut through the air like ice, "your position is no longer required, effective immediately." Ilara felt her stomach drop. The words seemed to echo in the cold, empty room. She nodded slowly, trying to swallow the lump rising in her throat. "On Christmas Eve," she whispered almost to herself. Mr. Harrington made no answer. He merely nodded once curtly, as if the date meant nothing. Ilara gathered her things, her hands trembling, and left the room. The snow had begun to fall harder by the time she stepped outside. The city seemed strange, almost unreal. The streets were empty, the lights reflecting in wet puddles like little stars. Ilara wrapped her coat tightly around her, shivering not only from the cold but from the bitter ache of humiliation and fear. She wandered aimlessly, her mind a swirl of confusion. She had nowhere to go tonight, no family waiting for her, no friends to comfort her. She was alone in a city that suddenly felt enormous and merciless. As she walked, she noticed an alleyway she had never seen before. The entrance was narrow, framed by old stone walls that seemed to breathe shadows. Something about it drew her in, a subtle tug she could not explain. Perhaps it was the quiet, the promise of solitude, or perhaps it was something deeper, something ancient and unseen calling to her. Ilara hesitated at the edge of the alley. A faint mist curled around her feet, and the snow seemed to hush, as if the world itself were holding its breath. She stepped inside, her boots crunching softly on the frozen cobblestones. The alley was darker than the street, but she did not feel fear. Instead, a strange sense of anticipation stirred in her chest. The alley twisted and turned, the walls narrowing and closing in. She began to wonder if she had made a mistake, if she should turn back. But before she could decide, a shadow detached itself from the darkness ahead. Tall, imposing, and impossibly still, a man stood there. His eyes shone like polished onyx in the dim light, and his presence seemed to fill the alley, heavy and commanding. He was dressed in a coat of deep black, and his hair fell like silk around his pale face. "Ilara," he said, his voice smooth and low, echoing slightly against the stone walls. "I've been waiting for you." She froze. The name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. She did not know how he knew her name, yet somehow she felt that he did not intend to harm her. There was power in his presence, yes, but also a strange sense of purpose, as if he had been searching for her across time itself. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I am Caliph, he replied, stepping closer, his movements graceful and deliberate. The one who watches when the world ignores. You carry a mark, a burden you do not understand, and I can help you understand it. Ilara's brow furrowed. A mark, a burden. She glanced at her wrist. There was nothing visible there, at least not to the naked eye. But under the dim glow of the alley, she thought she saw a faint shimmer, almost like a shadow moving beneath her skin. You watch people, she asked cautiously, taking a small step back. Not all people, Caliph said softly. Only those who are lost. Only those who carry what they do not yet see. Something about his words struck a chord deep inside her. She had always felt unseen, overlooked, dismissed by the world. And yet this stranger, this tall, mysterious man, spoke as if he had been following her life, understanding her struggles in ways no one else ever had. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Caliph's gaze softened, though only slightly, like a shadow lifting from a hidden corner of his face. "Because, Ilara, you are more than what you appear to be, and because tonight, when the world turns its back, choices are made that can change everything." Ilara swallowed hard. She did not understand, and yet somehow she felt the truth of his words. She had been invisible all her life, and now, standing in this narrow alley with snow swirling around her, she felt seen. He extended his hand, long and pale, his fingers tipped with nails that glinted like onyx in the faint light. "Come with me. There is a place you were meant to find. There is a world beyond this one, a world that will explain what you are and what you are meant to become." Fear tugged at her chest, but so did curiosity. Something inside her longed for escape, for understanding, for something beyond the crushing emptiness of rejection and invisibility. She hesitated, then slowly, trembling, placed her hand in his. The world seemed to shift. The snow swirled faster, the alley stretched, and the walls shimmered as if made of liquid shadow. A soft, otherworldly light glowed around them, and a gentle wind whispered secrets only she could almost hear. When the light faded, they were no longer in the alley. They stood in a vast hall, endless in every direction, lit by countless candles that floated in the air without flame. The air smelled of old stone, of winter roses, and of something ancient and powerful that made her heart beat faster. Caliph released her hand but remained close, his eyes scanning her with an intensity that made her shiver. "This is my world," he said. "Not all who enter survive its truths, but you have the courage, though you may not yet know it, to face what lies ahead." Ilara looked around, her mouth dry, her thoughts racing. The hall seemed endless, and the shadows moved like living things. She wanted to run, to escape, but some invisible force held her in place, as if the ground beneath her feet understood that this was where she belonged if she dared to stay. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice quivering. "Why now?" Caliph's gaze softened, but there was a shadow in his eyes, a weight of centuries of loneliness and loss. "Because, Ilara, your heart has been waiting for something it cannot name, and I have been waiting for you, for someone who can remind me of what I lost long ago. Someone who can change the fate I have carried for centuries." The words, though strange and heavy, touched something deep within her. She felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and something entirely new, longing. She did not understand it yet, but she felt its truth. The candles in the hall swayed as if moved by an invisible wind, casting shadows that danced like spirits across the walls. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but in this place, time felt suspended. The city, the cold, the rejection, all of it seemed distant, like a forgotten dream. Ilara took a shaky breath. She did not know what lay ahead, but somehow she felt that stepping forward into the unknown might finally lead her to herself. Caliph studied her silently, then nodded once as if satisfied by her choice. "Come," he said, his voice both gentle and commanding. "The night is long and the journey has only begun." Ilara followed, her hand brushing against the invisible currents of power that flowed through the hall. Her heart raced, Her mind spun with questions, but beneath it all, she felt something she had never felt before. The stirrings of courage, of possibility, of a destiny she could no longer ignore. And as the first distant bell of midnight rang across the city, marking Christmas Eve, Alara realized she had been fired from her old life. Yes, but perhaps she had been freed for something far greater. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the candle-lit hall, Caliph watched her with an intensity that was almost painful, as if he had been waiting for this moment across centuries. And in that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a promise, a warning, a destiny that would bind them together in ways neither could yet imagine. Snow fell silently over the city, covering it in white. But in the hidden hall, a new story had begun. The hall stretched endlessly before Alara, its walls lined with floating candles whose light seemed to bend and shimmer as though alive. Each flicker cast shadows that danced across the stone floors in patterns both beautiful and unsettling. She moved cautiously, her eyes wide, her mind racing. This world, Caliph's world, was nothing like the city she had known. It was older, deeper, and full of a quiet, powerful darkness that made her pulse quicken. Caliph walked beside her, tall and imposing, his steps soundless despite the echoing hall. He spoke little, but his presence filled every corner of the space. Even when he was silent, she felt the weight of his gaze, sharp and knowing like a blade she could not avoid. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice soft, uncertain. "To the heart of this place," Caliph said. His voice was calm, controlled, yet it carried a hint of something she could not identify, something ancient and lonely. "There are truths you need to see, Alara, and choices you must make." Alara nodded, though she did not fully understand. Her curiosity battled with fear. She had never believed in magic, in curses, in immortal beings who watched the world from shadows. And yet, here she was, standing beside one, feeling as though she had been pulled along a path she could not refuse. The hall ended at a wide staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. Caliph led the way, his coat brushing silently against the stone walls. The air grew colder as they descended, carrying the scent of old stone, winter roses, and something indefinable, like the memory of nights long past. At the bottom of the staircase, the space opened into a vast chamber. Stalactites of crystal hung from the ceiling, catching the candlelight and scattering it like fragmented stars. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the candles above, and in the center of the room a pool of black water shimmered, perfectly still. "This is the mirror pool," Caliph said, gesturing to the water. "It shows more than reflections. It reveals truths, even the ones we hide from ourselves." Alara approached cautiously, peering into the dark water. At first she saw only her own pale reflection, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. But as she watched, the surface rippled and images began to form, scenes she did not recognize. Shadows of herself, walking alone through snow, reaching out for something she could not grasp. And then, a faint mark appeared on her wrist, glowing softly beneath her skin. Caliph's eyes followed the mark with an intensity that made her shiver. "It has awakened," he said quietly. "The curse you carry is ancient. It is tied to forces older than either of us, and it has chosen this moment to call you forward." Alara's hand went to her wrist. She felt the faint heat of it, like a pulse beneath her skin. "A curse," she whispered. "I don't understand. Why me? I've done nothing wrong." Caliph stepped closer, his shadow falling over the pool. "It is not about wrongdoing," he said. "It is about balance and the weight of choices made long before you were born. You are the key, Alara, and he hesitated, his gaze darkening. "I am bound to the same fate." She looked at him, confusion and fear mingling with something else, curiosity, fascination, and a strange, unnameable pull. Caliph's face, pale and perfect in the candlelight, held centuries of sorrow. There was a loneliness in his eyes that reached her heart, an ache she could almost touch. "Bound? What do you mean?" she asked. Caliph studied her for a moment as if weighing her courage. Then he spoke slowly, carefully. I am bound to darkness, to a cycle of isolation. For centuries I have lived apart from the world, watching it, never touching it, never letting it touch me. And yet, seeing you, I feel something I have not felt in 100 years. A chance to change it, to break the chains that hold me. Alara swallowed hard. The words were heavy, almost too heavy for her mind to hold. She had always been invisible, always careful, always small. And now, standing in this vast, shadowed chamber, she realized that her life, her fate, was intertwined with someone she barely knew, someone more powerful than she could imagine. Why me? She asked again. Why now? Caliph's gaze softened, though a shadow lingered in his eyes. Because you have something most cannot see, strength, courage, and a heart that has not yet been hardened by the world. These qualities make you rare, and rare things are noticed by forces older than empires. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never imagined herself as rare. She had always been quiet, unnoticed. And yet here she was, standing beside a man whose presence could command silence, whose eyes seemed to pierce through time itself. Caliph extended his hand once more. You have a choice, Alara. You may return to your world, back to the streets and the towers that dismissed you. Or you may come with me into this world and learn what you are truly meant to be. The choice is yours, but know this. Once you step fully into this realm, there is no turning back. Alara hesitated. Her mind spun with fear and uncertainty. The streets she had known were safe in their own way, though lonely and cold. But the possibility of understanding herself, of finding a purpose she had never imagined, how could she refuse? Come with me, Caliph said softly, as if reading her thoughts. Do not fear the unknown. It is only unknown because it has not been seen yet. With a trembling breath, Alara took his hand. The hall seemed to shiver, the candles flickering as though in approval. She felt a surge of warmth run through her, mingled with fear and exhilaration. Together they stepped forward. The world shifted around them. Shadows curled and stretched, and the air pulsed with unseen energy. Alara felt as if the walls themselves were alive, as if they were breathing and watching. Yet she did not pull away. Something about Caliph's presence grounded her, even as the world seemed to bend and twist in impossible ways. They arrived in a smaller chamber, filled with ancient tomes and glowing artifacts. The air smelled of old parchment and a faint hint of roses. Caliph moved to a shelf, selecting a book bound in black leather. The cover was embossed with symbols she did not understand, symbols that seemed to shimmer with life. This, he said, placing the book gently on a stone pedestal, contains the history of your curse and the choices that have led us here. Read it carefully and do not be afraid. Knowledge is the first step toward freedom. Alara opened the book, her fingers trembling. The pages were filled with writing in a language she could understand, but that seemed alive, flowing before her eyes. She saw stories of people bound by fate, of dark powers that watched the world, and of a prophecy that spoke of one with a heart both gentle and strong. Caliph watched her silently, standing close but not touching. His eyes followed every movement, his expression unreadable yet intensely focused. He did not speak, allowing her the space to absorb the weight of the words, but the energy between them was thick, charged with something she could not name. Hours seemed to pass, though time felt suspended. Alara read of ancient battles fought in shadows, of curses that lingered across generations, and of choices that shaped the fates of kingdoms. She felt a mixture of fear and fascination. The words spoke of a destiny she had never imagined, a destiny she was already part of, whether she liked it or not. Finally, she closed the book, her hands shaking. She looked at Caliph, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. It says I have a choice, she said quietly. But what if I fail? Caliph stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. Failure is only part of the journey. Even in failure there is learning. But fear is what binds you more tightly than any curse ever could. You must choose with courage, Alara, not with doubt. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the strange thrill of stepping into a world that had seemed impossible moments ago. She had always lived in shadows, but now she had a chance to step into the light, however faint it might be. Caliph extended his hand again, and this time she did not hesitate. She took it firmly, her resolve strengthening. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll face it." A faint smile touched Caliph's lips, almost imperceptible but enough to soften the harshness of his features. "Good," he said. "Then the true journey begins." As they left the chamber, the air outside shimmered with an almost tangible energy. Shadows moved along the walls, curling and twisting, as if aware of her presence. Alara felt both exhilarated and terrified. She had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: her life was no longer her own. And somewhere deep in the endless corridors of Caliph's palace, a faint pulse of magic stirred, reacting to the courage she had just shown, awakening a force that had slept for centuries, waiting for her arrival. The night outside remained still, snow falling silently over the world below, but inside, Alara felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She did not yet know what awaited, but the pull of the unknown was irresistible. Caliph walked beside her, a silent guardian and guide, and in the unspoken tension between them, a bond began to form. A bond of trust, curiosity, and something deeper that neither dared name. And as the first faint hints of dawn brushed the edges of the sky beyond the palace, Alara understood that nothing would ever be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and beautiful all at once. And she was ready to walk it, step by step, into the shadows and the light. The forest lay beyond the palace walls, a realm of silence and mist that seemed untouched by time. The trees were ancient, their gnarled branches stretching high into the sky, woven together like a cathedral of shadows. Snow clung to the limbs, making the forest shimmer in pale silver under the faint light of Caliph's floating candles. Alara hesitated at the edge of the forest, her breath coming in quick, nervous puffs. The air smelled of pine, cold earth, and something deeper, older, an energy that seemed alive, watching. She shivered, not entirely from the cold, but from the weight of anticipation. Caliph stood beside her, silent, his eyes scanning the darkened path ahead. In the candlelight, his pale face looked even more striking, and the quiet authority in his posture made her heart beat faster. "This forest is not ordinary," he said softly, his voice carrying through the still air. "It reacts to thought, to fear, to doubt. You must focus on yourself, Alara, or it will twist your mind and reflect your deepest fears back at you." Alara nodded, gripping the edges of her coat. She had already seen shadows of herself in the mirror pool, glimpses of her fear and uncertainty. Facing them here, out in the open, under the weight of this ancient forest, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "Do not worry," Caliph added, his tone softer now, almost comforting. "I will be with you always, but you must also trust yourself. This journey is as much about discovering who you are as it is about the curse you carry." She took a deep breath and followed him. Each step felt heavy, the snow crunching beneath her boots. As they moved deeper into the forest, the shadows seemed to shift and stretch, forming shapes that were almost human. At first she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but Caliph's hand brushing hers confirmed he could see it too. "Do not be afraid of what you see," he said quietly. "These shadows are reflections of the past, of what has been lost. They are not real, but they carry lessons. Learn from them." Alara nodded again, though fear prickled at her. As they walked, the shadows began to move more deliberately. Figures formed, silhouettes of people, some familiar, some strange, echoing moments from Caliph's long life. She saw images of him standing alone on rooftops in cities that no longer existed, eyes dark, heart heavy with centuries of solitude. "Why do you look so sad?" she whispered, not fully understanding why she cared so deeply. Caliph paused, his gaze fixed on the shadows. "Because loneliness is heavier than any burden you will ever know," he said. "And because I have watched life pass me by, waiting for something I thought would never come. Until now." Alara's chest tightened at his words. She had always known what it was to feel small, unnoticed, and yet here was someone who had carried centuries of sorrow, someone whose pain dwarfed her own, and yet he seemed to need her in a way she could not yet comprehend. They moved further and the forest grew darker, the mist thicker. The shadows began to speak in whispers, murmurs that twisted words she could not understand. The path beneath their feet narrowed, and the snow became slippery with ice. Suddenly a branch snapped sharply behind them. Alara jumped, spinning around, but no one was there. Her heart pounded. "It is the forest testing you," Caliph said calmly, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "It senses fear and it will use it. Breathe. Focus on your strength, not your fear." Alara swallowed, taking a deep breath. She felt his presence beside her, steady and unwavering. It was strange how his calmness could steady her own nerves. She had never felt safe with anyone, yet here she was, trusting a man she barely knew with her life. As they progressed, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into shapes that seemed to rise from the snow. Shadows of wolves, twisted and dark, circled them, their eyes glowing faintly. The air grew cold, sharper than before, and Alara felt the first real pang of fear in this place. "Focus," Caliph said, his hand tightening over hers. "They are shadows. They cannot harm you if you believe they cannot." Alara closed her eyes, forcing herself to steady her breathing. Slowly, she felt the fear receding, replaced by a quiet determination. She opened her eyes and the shadows wavered, as if recognizing her strength. The wolves dissolved into mist, leaving only the silver snow and the soft sound of wind through the trees. Caliph studied her carefully, his eyes gleaming with approval. "Well done," he said softly. "You are stronger than you realize, stronger than I thought." She blushed, looking down at her boots. I think I am still scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And that is natural," Caliph said. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Alara. It is moving forward despite it." They continued, and soon the forest opened into a clearing. In the center stood a stone pedestal, cracked and weathered by time. Upon it rested a small, glowing orb, pulsing with light that seemed to breathe. Alara felt the pull of it immediately, a gentle tug at her chest that made her step forward instinctively. "That is what we came for," Caliph said. "The source of your curse, and the key to understanding it." Alara reached out, hesitating as her fingers hovered above the orb. The air seemed to vibrate and the shadows in the forest whispered urgently. She felt a flicker of doubt. What if she was not ready? What if touching it brought danger? "You can do this," Caliph said softly, his voice like a tether pulling her forward. "I believe in you." Her hand closed around the orb, and instantly a wave of energy surged through her. She gasped, staggering back slightly, but Caliph caught her gently. The orb's light reflected in his eyes, making them seem impossibly deep, impossibly alive. Visions flooded her mind, images of past lives, of battles fought in shadows, of pain and sorrow carried across centuries. She saw Caliph alone, burdened by darkness, and herself, small and timid, yet somehow luminous. She understood in that instant that their fates were intertwined. The orb pulsed faster, reacting to her realization. The whispers of the forest rose to a crescendo, then abruptly stopped. Silence fell, heavy and complete. Alara's breath came in ragged gasps. She looked up at Caliph, who held her gaze steadily, calm and unwavering. "You see now," he said softly, "why you were chosen. You carry the courage and heart to face what others cannot, and I have the chance to change because of you." Her chest ached at his words. She had never felt so important, so noticed, so needed. And yet the weight of it frightened her. The forest was quiet now, but she knew it was still alive, still watching, still testing them. Suddenly, the orb's light flared, and the shadows in the clearing coalesced into a dark, twisting form. It was neither human nor animal, a mass of black energy with glowing red eyes that pierced the night. The forest seemed to shrink around them, the mist curling like fingers. "It has sensed your awakening," Caliph said, his tone darkening, "and it does not want you to succeed. Stand firm, Alara, trust in yourself and in me." Alara's heart pounded, but she squared her shoulders. She had faced fear before, and now, standing beside Caliph, she felt a courage she had never known. She gripped the orb tightly, feeling the warmth of it spread through her hands. The dark entity lunged, moving with unnatural speed. Caliph stepped forward, placing himself between her and the shadow. His eyes glowed faintly, and a wave of energy radiated from him, pushing the entity back. Alara felt the power in him, and yet she also felt her own growing strength, the courage that had carried her this far. "Together," Caliph said, his voice firm. "You and I together." She nodded, and they focused their combined will. Light and shadow collided in the clearing, the orb pulsing in her hands. The entity shrieked, then dissolved into mist, leaving only the silver snow and the quiet hum of the forest. Alara sank to her knees, breathing hard, the orb dimming in her hands. Caliph knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced your fear and overcame it. That is the first step. There will be more, but know this, you are not alone, Alara. Not now, not ever." She looked up at him, her chest still pounding. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "No," Caliph said, his gaze intense. "You could. I only guided you. The courage was always yours, remember that." They stood together in the clearing, the snow falling softly around them, the forest alive but peaceful. For the first time, Alara felt a deep connection, not just to Caliph but to herself. She was small, yes, and timid, yes, but she was also brave, strong, and she had begun to understand that the path ahead, though dangerous, was hers to walk. And as they made their way back through the twisting paths of the forest, hand in hand, the shadows seemed to bow before them, acknowledging a new bond, a new strength, and a new chapter yet to unfold. The first light of dawn brushed the edges of the horizon, pale and fragile, against the dark city below. Snow still fell, soft and steady, covering the streets in silence. From Caliph's palace high above, the city looked small and insignificant, a world removed from the ancient struggles that had taken place within the shadowed halls. Alara stood at the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. The events in the forest had left her exhausted but alive, filled with a new understanding of herself. She glanced at Caliph, who remained a few steps behind, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture tense, though calm. He had not spoken since they had returned from the forest, and the weight in the air between them was palpable. "You've been quiet," she said softly, turning to face him. "Are you all right?" Caliph's gaze met hers, deep and unreadable. "I am always quiet in moments like this," he said slowly. "But you should know, Alara, that the forest was only the first trial. What lies ahead is greater, and it will require more than courage. It will require trust, faith, and the willingness to face what you fear most." Her stomach tightened. She had already faced fear, had felt the dark presence of shadows trying to twist her mind. Yet hearing Caliph speak of something greater made her realize that their journey was far from over. What is waiting for us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caliph turned his gaze to the city below. "The curse," he said. "It is not just a mark, not just an energy or a test. It is alive, tied to something far older than either of us. It will challenge not only you but me as well, and only by facing it together can we hope to survive." Alara nodded, determination rising in her chest. She had already come so far. She had faced the shadows of her own doubt, had discovered courage she had never known existed. And she had begun to see Caliph, not just as a powerful, mysterious figure, but as someone capable of pain, of longing, of hope. The doors to the inner chamber opened silently, revealing a space she had not seen before. The walls were lined with ancient symbols that glowed faintly, their light pulsing like the heartbeat of the world itself. In the center of the room, the mirror pool shimmered once more, dark and still. Caliph led her forward and the air grew thick with power. "The final trial awaits," he said. "Here, the curse will reveal its full strength. And only by confronting it, by trusting each other, can it be undone." Ilara's hand went to her wrist, feeling the faint warmth of the mark beneath her skin. She could sense its power, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Fear fluttered in her chest, but it was accompanied by a strange exhilaration. She was no longer the timid girl fired on Christmas Eve. She was someone stronger, braver, and the journey had only begun. The mirror pool's surface rippled, and shadows emerged from its depths. They were darker than anything she had seen in the forest, twisting and sharp, their eyes like burning coals. The whispers returned, louder now, forming words she could almost understand. "You are not worthy. You are not ready. You cannot survive." Caliph stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers briefly. "They are lies," he said firmly. "Do not listen. Trust in yourself and trust in me." Ilara took a deep breath. She had faced lies before, shadows that twisted reality and fed on fear. She could do it again. Her fingers closed around Caliph's hand, and she felt a surge of energy flow between them. The shadows recoiled slightly, sensing the bond forming between them, the strength that came from unity rather than solitude. "Together," she whispered. "Together," Caliph echoed, his voice low and steady. The shadows lunged, twisting and writhing, but this time Ilara did not falter. She focused on the warmth in Caliph's hand, on the courage she had discovered in herself, on the light that had begun to grow within her. She felt the curse reacting, trying to resist, trying to pull her into fear and doubt. But she did not let it. She drew strength from her own heartbeat, from the connection to Caliph, from the knowledge that she had survived every test so far. The shadows screamed and twisted, but slowly the energy around her began to shift. The mirror pool pulsed brighter, and the mark on her wrist glowed like silver fire. Caliph stepped closer, his other hand raised, and a wave of his own power radiated outward. Together their wills combined, a light of warmth and strength flowing between them. The shadows writhed, screamed, and finally dissolved into mist, leaving only the calm surface of the pool. Ilara sank to her knees, her breath ragged, and Caliph knelt beside her, steadying her. She looked at him, her chest heaving, her eyes shining with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced it. You embraced yourself. You freed more than just yourself tonight." Ilara shook her head, unable to fully comprehend the enormity of what had happened. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice trembling. Caliph's gaze softened, and for a moment the centuries of solitude and pain that clung to him seemed to fall away. "No," he said, "you could, I only guided you. The strength, the courage, it was always yours." She looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a connection, a bond that went deeper than words. She felt seen in a way she never had before, understood in a way that defied explanation. The mirror pool shimmered, reflecting not only their images, but the energy that now flowed between them. The curse, once pulsing and oppressive, had dimmed to a faint glow, a reminder of what had been overcome, a symbol of what could still grow. Caliph extended his hand, and Ilara took it without hesitation. The warmth of his touch grounded her, steadying her after the storm of fear and power she had just faced. Together, they rose, their movements synchronized, their presence in the room filling it with a sense of balance and hope. "You are changed," Caliph said, his voice soft but certain. "And I am changed because of you. This bond, this trust, it is what has broken the chains that bound us both." Ilara felt tears prick her eyes. She had always believed herself small, insignificant, unseen. And now, standing beside Caliph, she realized that she mattered, that her courage, her heart, her choices had power beyond measure. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Caliph smiled faintly, a rare softness in his expression. "Now we step into a new life. The curse is broken, but its memory remains, a guide for what is to come. And together, we will face whatever waits in the world outside this palace. For the first time in centuries, I am not alone. And you are not alone either." Outside, the first rays of sunlight touched the snow-covered city, soft and golden. The world seemed quiet, peaceful, as though it too recognized the change that had taken place. The air smelled of winter, of possibility, and of hope. Alara looked at Caliph, her chest still filled with adrenaline and awe. "I think I understand now," she said slowly. "I am not just someone who is seen only when others notice me. I am someone who can make a difference." Caliph's hand squeezed hers gently. "And I am someone who can feel again," he said quietly. "Because of you, Alara, you have reminded me of what it means to hope, to trust, to care." They stood together on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly below, snow glistening in the morning light. The air was crisp, filled with the quiet promise of a new beginning. And for the first time, both of them felt the weight of centuries lift, replaced by a fragile, growing light. Alara's gaze wandered to the horizon, where the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, a quiet understanding that her life, once small and uncertain, had become extraordinary. Caliph's presence beside her was a reminder of the bond they shared, of courage, of trust, and of something deeper, something that could endure beyond shadows and time. "Whatever comes next," Caliph said softly, "we will face it together." Alara nodded, her hand tightening in his. "Together," she echoed. And as the city below awoke to the first light of day, a sense of calm settled over them. The curse had been broken, the trials faced, and the bond forged in shadows and fire had become a light of its own. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, both felt the quiet certainty that they could meet whatever challenges awaited, not as one alone, but as two, bound by trust, courage, and the beginnings of a profound connection. The palace behind them was silent, the shadows still lingering but powerless against the strength of what had been awakened. The snow continued to fall softly, blanketing the city in white, and the world, though vast and uncertain, seemed full of possibility. Alara and Caliph stood together, looking out at the horizon. They had faced darkness, embraced courage, and discovered strength beyond themselves. And as the sun rose higher, they knew that this was only the beginning, the dawn of a new fate, a new story, and a bond that could endure beyond time itself.